Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. You're watching our cloud school. Today in this demonstration, we will look at how to transform your CosmosDB data with Azure Data Factory. So I have this data which is being generated from this GitHub API, and this is returning all the issues which are in state close from this particular organization and repository. So what I've done is I have prepared this data as an example and saved or created the data from this output inside my CosmosDB account. So this is the CosmosDB account which we have created for the demonstration in our Azure subscription. The CosmosDB account has this GitHub collection as a dataset or database, and inside this database we have this record collection. Right now, if I run the query on this record collection, which is select a star from C on this container, this is what we get the result. So I have copied or created 6 record, and record contains the same information what you can find it here. Now, as an exercise of this demonstration, what I want is I would like to fetch the information from this collection, but I don't want to fetch the information what we have it as is. I would like to create a custom JSON structure out of this particular record. And to create a custom JSON structure, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a custom query on this CosmosDB container, and this is what my custom query is going to be look like. Select value, which is the keyword, and then I'm going to have this select ID and then the user object, and user object would have these 3 properties. If I'm going to run the query, this is what the output I'm looking for, right? So that it will have the same 6 record, but it will have this some different structure as an output. And what I want to do is I would like to save this output as in a JSON file, and that too in a valid JSON file, right? So I'm going to save the JSON file into a storage container, right? And this JSON file should look like this. So just for the demonstration, I'm going to validate the output in the JSON lint online validation, and the file should look like this, right? So let's look at that. How do we perform this activity with Azure Data Factory? So I'm going to use this Azure Data Factory instance for the demonstration, where I'm going to create new pipeline, right? So just to show you, I'm going to create a new pipeline. I have the canvas now. Before I actually use the approach to define or to write or generate a file as an output in the storage container, what I'm going to show you is a simplest way to fetch the data and to validate your data within the data factory is you can perform the activity using the lookup action. So with the lookup, you can write the query, or you can paste the same or use the same query here in the lookup within the data factory, right? The lookup requires the dataset to be provided. So I already have a dataset, which is this particular dataset. I can use this dataset if I want to. Let me just show you this dataset as a container. So let me just see if it has a container already available, which is this one, right? Now what I can do is I can just remove this first row option. As we have already discussed about the lookup activity in our previous demonstration, if you would like to know more about the lookup activity, you can refer to that video. So I'm not going to spend too much of time on this, but just to show you that I can run the same query here in this query panel. Like I'm just pasting the query, and then if I simply validate or debug the output of this pipeline, that will return the same exact result, right? So let's just wait for this query to be completed. So the query is successfully completed. Now if I expand the result, you would see that we have got the data which we are looking for, all 6 record, right? If you look at the total number of count of record is 6, right? And it is the same record. But the objective of this demonstration we have is we would like to write this data into a file, and right now with lookup activity I cannot write an output to a file. So what I'm going to do is to write an output to a file, I'm going to use the data flow, and for that I'm going to define a new data flow. Let's say I have dragged this data flow action, and if I go to the settings, I have to define a new data flow. So instead of choosing the existing data flow, I'll be creating a new data flow. So let's click on new data flow. That will open a new data flow activity on the panel. You can see that here at the left side we have the data flow 3. You can call it anything like data flow copy from Cosmos, right? Here you need to provide the data source option, and data source I'm going to use the CosmosDB because our source is the CosmosDB from where we would like to read the data, right? Here I'm going to specify the CosmosDB dataset. I can still use the same dataset, but I would like to create a new dataset just to show you how do we create the CosmosDB kind of a dataset. It is the same step what we do for any other dataset. This time I'm going to select the Azure CosmosDB for NoSQL as a dataset. I'm going to provide a name to my CosmosDB dataset. Link service, you can use the existing link service if you have it, like I have it, I can create it, or you can create on new link service by clicking on the new button. So let's call the link service as in Cosmos. Here the authentication options we have as in the default as in the account key. If you have the access to fetch the account key on your behalf from your Azure Data Factory to the CosmosDB, then you can use this particular option. Or apart from this, you have the options such as the Azure Service Principal, System Managed Identity, and User Managed Identity. For this demonstration, I'm going to keep the account key as a default option. Like I mentioned, you need to have a valid access to fetch the key from your Azure Data Factory to the CosmosDB. So you as a user should have a valid access for that, as I am the owner on this subscription. So you can see that load key is trying to grab the key of this CosmosDB. So when I say key, basically it's trying to return the key or reading the key from this, right? This is the information it's trying to grab so that it can authenticate. And as it has already been authenticated, you would see that from this drop down it is trying to grab the information of the database, which is a GitHub collection. Click on this test connection. That will basically test the connection successfully, which means that my link service is fully proof. I'm able to create the link service. I'll click on create. That will create a link service, which you can find it here on the manage option. Now using this link service, I can use the data set to fetch the container information. That is where we have all our records. So this is why the container name we have given. You can also parameterize the container information if you don't want to use the container hard coded in your data set. And that is what we know already because we have seen many times how do we parameterize our containers or our data sets, right? Now if I double click on this data set, you would see that data set has this link service and it's using this container. Again, anytime if you would like to make a parameterize, I can create a parameter with a name as in container name. I can create that particular parameter name here as in container. So that's the option we have anytime if you want to give it. Now as we have fetch the container or attach this container with link service, if you go to the schema, you would see that it has already fetched the information about your container or the schema of the entire container. So whatever structure your container has, that is structure it has already fetched, right? Now coming back to the data source, my data source is now ready. Now with this data source, what I can do is I can perform the query from this source option. So the default query it will run is the container query, right? Which is going to be same select star from C, which is return in the all my column from that container, which is not something I want. I want a specific column in the specific JSON structure. So I'm going to use this query option. So I'll be selecting this query option, and here I'm going to use the same query which we have run. Right? Now with this query, what you can do is you can run the query to fetch the data, right? And for that you have to enable this is debug mode on the data flow. So I'm going to run or enable the debug mode for the data flow for debug time to live for 1 hour, and that's going to be enabled for next 1 hour as long as I'm working on it, right? So debug option is enabled. Now if I click on the data preview and refresh, that should fetch the data by running my query, and that will return the result in the same structure which we are expecting to return, right? And that is what the result we are looking for. So you have an ID column, then you have user data which is of type object type, and then inside that you have these three properties. If you go to the inspect column or the optimize, you would not find anything. And if you go to the projection, at the moment it's not loaded any projection at the moment. Usually when you use CSV type or any other type to read the data from CSV, it usually load the same projection what you have it in the data set. What do I mean by that? If your data set has this particular schema, which is this one, right, your projection will also use the same schema, but in this case, as we are running the custom query, right, so it's not loading the result by default, because custom query has a slightly different result. So if I click on this import projection, or from here if I click on the import projection, then possibly it will import the same projection what we can see from here. But I'm not going to do that. The reason for that is, if you do not perform this import projection, then you will have an issue, and what issue will you have, that is something I'm going to show you before importing the projection, and that way you will know why it is necessary to import the projection. So let me just click on sync, because now we have got our data. We would like to write now finally to the output, and to generate an output I'm going to use a data set, which is going to be a JSON data set. We have created the JSON data set many times, so I'm not going to spend time on creating the new JSON data set. Just to show you, if I click on this JSON data set, it's going to write the file into this particular container, and at the moment the file name is this, but this is going to be ignored. The reason for that is, if I go to the sync and then setting option, from the file name option, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the output to a single file, and this will require set single partition as in projection, which means that from here this option is going to be selected. So if I select this option, and this error is gone now. So here I can give it a name as in a result.json. That's the name of the file I would like to give as an output. And if I just validate the file or validate my outcome, that's going to work perfectly fine. But of course I cannot run this data flow right here from this particular section. So we'll go to the root, which is our pipeline, and from this pipeline we'll debug our pipeline, so that will invoke the data flow, which is the activity, and from the data flow those two activity will be run, which is querying the data from the CosmosDB and then generating the file into a container. Now I'll be opening the container while it is trying to run the pipeline, so that we can see the outcome what we have it. But let's wait for this pipeline to be completed so that we can see the result what we are looking for. So our pipeline is successfully completed. Now if you look at the result at the container, we should see the file. So this is the file which has been generated. If I copy the data from this file, you can see that even before I copy, on line number 2, I can see there is an error which is not visible fully. But to make that error fully visible, I'll go to the JSON lint. Remember, we are looking for an output which is validated successfully like this. So I'm going to just remove this, and I'll just paste the output what we have received from the data factory. Let's validate it. And you can see that just after the line number 2, or just before the line number 2, we have got an error. The reason for that is because for each element of this JSON object we are expecting in comma, and this all element should be part of an array, right? And that is what the problem is with the current approach. So, which means that what I need to do is I need to make some adjustment to this particular logic, and I have to create a proper array format, right? We might have seen the similar implementation in our previous case when we were trying to read CSV to JSON, complex JSON, which is creating a collection as a JSON file from the CSV. So we are going to follow the same implementation here. So I'm going to click add new, and I'll add a new activity, and I'll select this aggregate option. So what I want to do is I would like to perform or create a collection from the result set which has been generated. So this is a result set what we have it here. From this result set I would like to create a collection, and for that I'm using this aggregate option, right? Aggregate transformation. Here I'm going to create a new column, and that column name I will call it as values, right? And with this column name I'm going to give it an expression. I will build an expression, and here I will use the function name. I hope you know which function I'll be referring. So the function name which I'll be using is collect, because collect function will basically generate an array from the data. You can see that the output which is trying to show here, which is this, is going to generate an array. But to generate an array we need the data type to be provided, and here if you look at the input schema, there is no data type. Why we don't have data type? The reason for that is because in the source where we are running the query, right, there is no schema. There is no schema in the projection, right? And that is the reason when I go to the expression here, I do not find any data which I would like to use to create my function or to create my output the way I want, right? So let me just discard this. So what I'm going to do is I will go to the source option where we have our query, right? Remember, this is the query we have. From the projection, from here I can import the projection. So what this will do is this will import the projection as in this select query outcome. You can also click on this import projection, more or less same thing, and I'm expecting the projection to be driven the way we are expecting in the similar structure. As you can see, we are expecting this ID, user data, everything we have it now. Now if you go to the aggregate, and that is why, remember, I was telling you that, remember that the reason I mentioned that this projection is important, because without projection you won't be able to use your column in any of the expression. So let's open the expression builder, and now if I go to the input schema, or even without going to the input schema, you can see that the ID and the user data column is now available, which was not the case previously. So again, this time again I'm going to use the collection function, and I'll build my output which I'm looking for. So I'm going to say ID equals to this ID, then I'll put comma, then I'll say user data equals to user data, and that is it. If I just simply save this by clicking on the save option, you would see that my values, which is of type array, would have this structure. Let's click on save and finish, and your aggregate function is successfully completed. Now if you try and preview the data, you would see that it's going to return an array, which is this one. You can click on this array option and you would see that your collection has got the result which you are looking for. With that, our pipeline or the data flow activity is successfully completed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now simply click on the debug so that I can run the data flow activity pipeline and generate the same output, which will override the output of this particular file, because the file name we have not changed. So which means that it will override the file data within the similar file. Pipeline is successfully completed. Let's validate the result one more time. I'm going to refresh it. This is what the result we are looking for. I'm going to click on edit, copy the data. This time it is arranged in a single line. Let me just clean this data. I'll paste it. And if I'm going to validate the JSON, you would see that now we have a proper JSON which contains the value as an object of which is of type array, and each array has element which is of having this particular type. So this is how you can generate a successful or valid JSON from the CosmosDB, which is having the custom format with the help of Azure Data Factory. That is it in this demonstration. I hope you have found this useful. If it is, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching it. See you in the next video.